Now that you have a general understanding of the four brain quadrants, I would like you to learn about the history of brain research in a very brief note below. Take a note of the following names. They are prominent neuroscientists. They were born in the 1940s, all of them, and now are in their 80s. After them, many other neuroscientists came, but they were the pioneers or the father of the fields, these four of them. There were many other researchers in neurobiology, but what separated them from others is the books that they wrote. They were able to write in popularistic styles. Among their many readers, I am one. I will not be talking about any particular books of theirs. Again, it would be beyond the scope of this book of mine. Instead, I invite you to look them up and either download or buy some of their books. This subsection has two objectives for me, the writer. The first one is to provide you the history of brain research, as I just mentioned. And the second one is to prove that my model of the four brain learning approach, which I have been claiming to be based on the anatomy of the brain, has got merit. This will become evident as I explain some of the cases that these neuroscientists explored and discussed in their books. So the four neuroscientists and writers are Michael Gazzaniga, Antonio Damasio, Oliver Sacks, and V.S. Ramachandran. Before their books, and obviously before the research on the brain about which they have written in those books, the brain was just a lump of meat. We didn't know much about it. Then in 1962, a patient that is known as WJ suffered from chronic epilepsy. Out of despair, a brain surgeon was given the case, and after some tests, he concluded that if the fibers and neurons connecting the left side of the brain and the right side of the brain were cut, then the fainting and other symptoms associated with the epilepsy would vanish. And so the operation was done. Miraculously, or as predicted, patient WJ stopped suffering from epilepsy. But it's just the beginning of a revolution in neuroscience. It was long presumed that the left hemisphere and the right hemisphere had different functions, but nobody imagined what the experiments showed later on. So the patient WJ was given various tests. In one among them, he was shown an object which only the left hemisphere could register. So, upon being asked what was shown to him, he could not answer it. However, when given a task to do something related to that particular object, he behaved as if he knew. That was baffling. The experiment was conducted many times and the results were the same. The theory that one hemisphere of the brain was related to seeing and the other hemisphere was related to speaking had been quite popular, but there was no way to prove it. This experiment proved that the theory was correct. While one hemisphere could see the object, the other could not tell what it is because the two had lost connection. In this way, the left and right brain divide came out from a hypothesis to become the truth. This was a sensation at that time. And this is the basis of my four quadrant brain model that I've talked about earlier on also. The scientists have come with various characteristics of each hemisphere. I'll not go through them here, but you can easily find it on the internet. It will suffice to say that the short words that I used as logical and expression dichotomy here matches the overall characteristics that science came up with. Next, I want to give you the example to establish the upper and lower divide of the brain. So there's this person called Phineas Gage. He was a factory worker. He was a very good man. One day, a long rod fell off from production line, and it pierced through his skull. Luckily, he did not die. He was taken to the surgeon, and the rod was removed from his skull. Within a few days, he was out of the hospital. However, his story begins only after his recovery, as is the case of patient WJ. Within a short period of time, everybody around him notices that Mr. Gage is not the same person as before. Whereas before he was composed, well mannered, now he's becoming brash and very foul in his behavior. It became so bad that the ladies couldn't go near him without being molested or attempted to do so. He never drank before, but later on he consumed a lot of alcohol. So from a virtuous person, he became a vicious person. Eventually, he was fired from his job. His end was not a happy one. Even though that rod piercing his skull and surviving it proved to be very unfortunate for him, for science, it was a landmark study, an opportunity. It proved that even if one part of the brain was damaged, here in the case of Phineas Gage, the prefrontal cortex, the individual can still live and operate normally. However, like in the earlier left-right divide, it was hypothesized that the upper brain and the lower brain had different functions, but it could never be proven because who could dissociate the two brains to make the research to prove or disprove that hypothesis? And then Phineas Gage came. What is clear now is that in the absence of the prefrontal cortex part of the brain or the upper brain not functioning, then the person would be unable to control his emotions and will act on his instincts highly emotionally. So the self-control capacity would decrease. In this way, it was established that yes, the upper brain and lower brain have different functions. Again, in my four brain quadrant model, I have made use of this upper and lower divide with the word concept and details. The neuroscientists have got much more vocabulary and properties, characteristics to describe the different parts of the brain and their functions. But for the model, I had to be brief. And I believe that these words did some justice to summarize those characteristics. So, from this short introduction on the history of the brain, I tried to prove that my four brain model of learning had got strong backing from the existing sciences on neurology. It might have been a bit forceful, but again, this is no PhD thesis. All I want you is to understand and have enough reasons to believe in my four brain learning approach. Next, in the history, I want to bring in my biggest influencer. He is a writer called Ned Herman, and his book is called The Creative Brain, published in 1986. I had the opportunity to read it in 2000. Reading this book shook me to the core when I was around 25. Every page filled me with awe and excitement. I still remember the images, the feelings, the voices as I was reading the book. Now I want to talk about how this book is related to my own book, which I have written after 25 years of pondering, research, and innovation. Ned Herman was working for a big company called General Electric in America. He was given the job of increasing the capacity of the employees in the company. Basically, he was in the training department. Being able to have access to cutting edge technology, he got the idea to use electrodes or sensors to measure the various activities of the brain. His hypothesis was that based on which area of the brain was more active, he could come up with the best way to teach that person. Like me now, he had concluded in his time that people have different learning approaches. He didn't know why or how. However, he was definitely sure it was about the brain. So he thought, why not measure the brain? In this way, he designed the various electrodes and the instruments. He divided the brain into the four quadrants as shown in the diagram, which correspond to mine because I have been inspired by his model. Again, I'm sure that, like me, he was influenced by the four neuroscientists or others this time. And amazingly, there were measurements that corresponded to that model of his. So some of the employees at GE had more activity in the upper quadrant of the left side, and while others have got more things going on in the lower right quadrant. Then he provided tests to people from the group he had measured brain activity. They were mostly cognitive tests, meaning exams as we know them. What he found out later on is that people with activities in different brain quadrants scored differently, and people in the same quadrant answered similarly. They were also given personality type of questions, preferences, and behavioral questions. Then it was obvious that there was a pattern. People who showed activity in a certain quadrant, irrespective of the department, age, gender, showed a similar type of learning preference, personalities, and then people in different quadrants showed differences. What he found out was that everybody had a dominant quadrant and a secondary quadrant also, but very few had activity in the third quadrant, and still fewer had activity in the four quadrants. He was also able to find out that people from different brain quadrants didn't get along very well, while people with the same brain quadrant get along better. Why so? Because they had similar ways of learning and preferences, values. It is not exactly certain what was similar, but definitely there was a lot of similarity between them. They were able to understand each other better, that is, those in the same quadrant, and the opposite occurred for those who were in the different quadrants. As you can see in the diagram, the four brain quadrants were given different colors. This was to make the teaching easier. In my own model, I have kept the same sequence as you might have noticed on the right hand side. The lower right side is red. In my model, it's called the information quadrant. Next to it is the green quadrant. In my model, it's called the skill quadrant. The upper left one is a blue quadrant, and in my model, it's called the knowledge quadrant. Next to it is the yellow quadrant, and in my model, it's called the wisdom quadrant. You can read the words summarizing each of the quadrants, and they correspond to my own model. In the last diagram, in the middle one, you can see that each of the quadrant prefers different types of questions. For example, the red quadrant or the information quadrant asks questions like who, because it's interested in relations, as I've talked to you earlier. What's in it for me? How does it relate to me? The green quadrant or the scale quadrant talks about how, mainly, is the procedures, the process, how things are done. Talked about the skills pyramid earlier on. I also told you earlier that our education system is mainly based on this skill or green quadrant. The blue quadrant or the knowledge quadrant asks the question what? What is the cause? What is the effect? What is the impact? What is the origin? What is the diagnosis? What is the prognosis? What's the function? What are the side effects? What are the dangers? And so on. What to do next? What to do in this scenario? What not to do in that scenario? If this, then what? If this, then what not? Finally, the yellow quadrant or the wisdom quadrant asks the question why? Why we need this? Why not that? What if we did that way? What's the use of this? How to apply these things? Why not combine that and this? Why can't it be done? What's next? And so on. So Ned Herman at the beginning used electrodes to measure the brain to find out which of the four quadrants a person was dominated by. But later on, this became quite cumbersome, as you might imagine. So he developed a questionnaire that we now know as HBDI, or the Herman Brain Dominance Index. It asks questions very much like any personality type questions, such as MBTI. There'll be four choices for each questions, and each option is related to one of the brain quadrants. So based on that score from the HBDI, then it is now possible to determine which quadrant dominates a person and which is the secondary domination without using electrodes in our heads. Again, these kind of instruments have been statistically tested thoroughly. They are highly reliable and they make very good predictions. The report comes out in the form of a star graph, as you can see. This particular example that is shown tells that this person has got a predominance of the red quadrant or the information quadrant. This is because the side of the polygon is extending furthermost in that red. Then it is the least dominated by the blue quadrant because it has the shortest side at that point. Then there is some dominance of the green quadrant as well as the yellow quadrant. What Ned Herman taught us is that we all are able to use our four brain quadrants, but we prefer one quadrant or two over the others. What he also taught us is that we can train ourselves to learn to activate the inactive brain quadrants in ours. So, for example, in this particular case shown in the diagram, this person is weak in the blue quadrant, and through proper training, he can improve it. Because we are humans, we have some kind of activity in all of the four quadrants. So, the best way to learn is to use the four quadrants themselves together. And the best way to teach is to use the four quadrants all at once. In my own training practice, I have done exactly this. Whenever I teach something, I try to use all the four brain quadrants of mine. Why? Because I'm not sure what is the dominance in terms of brain quadrant my audience has. What I found out is most of the science students have got a dominance of the blue or knowledge quadrant. Then the students of hotel management have got a dominance of the red or information quadrant. The chartered accountants and lawyers, they have dominance of the green quadrant or the skills quadrant. Consequently, I find it very difficult to talk to them or give them any type of training because I am diametrically opposite to them, being dominated by the yellow quadrant or the wisdom quadrant. However, I'm trying to improve, and it's working. My book is helping me, along with all my research and my own interaction with people from other quadrants. So the bottom line here is that my own model has got a lot of basis, and I believe that it will stand the test of time. But for now, all I need is enough credibility from you to read further on.